Hello and welcome to the State of Events, where event professionals connect. Current legislation has been advocated on behalf of over 12 million event professionals, yet many event professionals are unaware, and quite frankly, illiterate on legislative knowledge in general. We often don't understand the government, are intimidated by it, and depending on your background, flat out don't trust it. Both mistrust and illiteracy will cause it doesn't affect me behavior, particularly with disenfranchised communities. Legislative Literacy is a podcast series intended to establish legislative literacy, dispel governmental myths, and ultimately create a space for listeners to gain bite-sized information, empowering you to take action. Welcome, Mr. Dwayne Thomas. We finally have you on the show. It has been a long time coming. Welcome to the State of Events. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for all that you're doing on behalf of the events industry.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's an honor, honestly.
Dwayne, for those people who do not know who you are and who do not know about the Live Events Coalition, can you just bring us up to speed with who you are, how you function within the coalition, and then what is the coalition?
A gentleman named Isaac Rothwell, shortly into March of 2020, like so many of us, saw the writing on the wall, and the thinking was, oh boy, everything's going to shut down. He decided that there was going to be a real problem because we were going to need help, and no one was going to know that we needed it. So he started a petition, got close to 500,000 signers. Within a month or so, he had tilted up, the skeleton of what became Live Events Coalition, and had another petition that he sent out there. I spotted the thing through, somebody sharing it on Facebook, and thought, oh, what a cool idea. Yeah, I'll sign this, first of all. And second of all, I'm going to do my own petition here in the state of Oregon, where I live. And I didn't know anything about my own legislature here in the state, but we got 2,000 signers in short order here, just in the network that we have here. In doing so, I started talking with colleagues that I work with in a normal state of affairs in the world of events, and we all just started having these conference calls and going, gee, what are we going to do, you guys? We are really up a creek here, and not even thinking this was going to go past June or so. And we decided to form our own little state coalition, and 7 of us initially, and then finally 9 founders got in the room twice a week on Zoom, and just talked everything through, from finding sponsors to tilting up a website to getting folks to quote unquote join the coalition. People were in this group legitimately trying to help each other and talk about, well, what do we do now? What kind of legislation should we be asking for? Shouldn't we be writing petitions and so forth? And the energy was all very, very good around that. Move ahead into May, and I saw another petition come out from the Live Events Coalition. I decided, we need to contact those guys and see if they'll kind of sponsor us, if we can put their logo on our website as one of our supporters. And one thing led to another, and I kind of became the letter writer. And then they said, well, why don't you sit on our government affairs committee? I'm like, oh, okay. And by August, it's why don't you lead our government affairs committee? By September, it's like, why don't you sit on our board of directors? On and on and on, and here we are.
Wow.
September a year later. It was just getting to know people remotely, and then the opportunity arises, and now I have these relationships with people I've never seen in person.
So can you paint this picture for us? So tell us a little bit about your background in events. How did you get started, and then ultimately, what led you to really wanting to be sort of involved in this capacity? Was it simply just because you experienced the effects of a pandemic, or were you maybe at a time in your career where it was time to sort of even take the advocacy jump? Where does your story begin?
That's a packed sentence you just said. I'll answer the first one first. I'm a lighting guy. I started in touring, like a lot of people do, and I've been at this for 40 odd years. The first 10 of which I was still thought I was going to be a musician. So, and then corporate lighting became a thing in the early 90s, and really pivoted to that. And then by the 2000s, social events were having more and more of our kind of lighting in it. So I've added that to the repertoire. So we mostly do private parties and fundraisers and a whole lot of big corporate. And how did I get involved with this? Was it the right time in my career? Not to the extent that it made it my intent to do this because of where I was. It just timed out okay. It timed out at a point where the team that I have at my little company, to the extent we had work, they couldn't wait to get back to it. And they have so much extra time that they were able to take a lot of my workload off of my table so that I could do this. And let's also highlight that we didn't have anything in 2020 after the close down. So it wasn't like I didn't have anything but time to work on this. And I could have done this whole thing. Well, let's aggressively pivot to virtual. And we got a couple of virtual gigs in 2020 and the first part of this year too. Nothing like what we would normally bill out. So I saw right away it wasn't going to be a panacea for us. It wasn't going to help much. So I just thought, I think my investment in not losing everything ought to be in advocacy. That's, I think, the best horse I can put on the track, really. This is a group effort for sure. And for instance, we're having all these one-on-one meetings with these members of Congress and have been for 8 or 9 months now. Well, in earnest, we'd had a few before, but we've really been going at it since January. That's one thing, but the people who take these surveys and who click through to our petitions or do a letter writing, and especially the people that we find who are constituents of these, particularly House representatives, where we really need to get somebody from the right district in the right state. And then even if it's a senator, we have to at least find somebody from that state who can tell their story in these meetings. We try to put 4 or 5 of them on each of these meetings so that they can say what's happened to their business. And those folks are immeasurably important because they're a deer in the headlight. They don't do this every day. And so they don't, that's got to be scary. I know I was nervous as heck the first couple times I did it. And after a while, you realize these are just people. They want to look good to you. So they're going to put their best foot forward. They're going to ask you questions that you already know the answers to. So, but for the folks who sacrifice their time to do it, those people are really, really important. We can't do this advocacy work without people jumping in when needed.
And you brought up a good point already, because we're going to get into the sort of, ABCs of legislation, but that's just it. I think that, when we get into this very important conversation on how to get involved, the first thing is to break this information down and explain what it means so that it doesn't seem like a big beast in trying to grasp, like, what is legislation? What are my senators actually doing on my behalf? Do they even care about the event professional? Little bit of a background that we might share here. So I sort of got my start, if you will, in touring as well. I was an executive assistant to the director of touring at AEG. And so I was there and then transferred over to supporting the executive or the director of global branding for AEG, and was at Concerts West for a few years, and did the whole touring schedule madness. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Be kind to your assistants, touring directors.
Oh, dang straight. Oh man.
Oh man. That was, thankfully I had a sweetheart of an executive, which never exists in live concerts ever.
Oh, I can tell you, having spent a little bit of time on the bus myself. So I get that.
Yes. But so let's break this down. So first, let's do the ABCs. What does legislation mean in general? And then if you want to throw in there, what does legislation mean as it pertains to the events industry, you can do that, but just create this understanding of what is legislation.
The first thing you need to know is that everything I'm about to say, which a lot of it is going to be pretty ham-fisted, I'm going to just say from the get-go. All of this was completely foreign to me a year and a half ago. I've had the good fortune of being around very expensive lobbyists that the LEC pays month in, month out to give us advice and to help open some doors for us and to proofread our letters and say, no, don't talk to those guys. It's a waste of time. And they also give us the lay of the land on Capitol Hill. What's happening right now? What can you expect? What is it like there? All these other things. And so that's been my education, is just shut up and listen. You wouldn't know it to hear me now, but I do, by and large, just shut up and then ask questions. So to add to your point, to your question, but what is legislation? It's the creation of laws, and you create laws around all kinds of things. You create it around voting rights. You create it around abortion rights. You create it around spending issues, around taxes. And for us, by and large, what we fought for, yes, we threw our hat into the ring with the employee retention tax credit. We signed a couple of other organizations letters saying, yeah, we'll throw our logo on that letter. That sounds good. But mainly what we fought for is two things, and we've been very successful with one and so far not successful with the other. Unemployment is the one that we've really jumped behind and made happen, so that people understand all the unemployment they may or may not, hopefully they were getting, or they didn't need it, one of the two. That a lot of that wasn't going to happen if you were a gigger, independent contractor, sole proprietor, business owner. You don't normally qualify for unemployment from your state. You have to be a W-2 worker to get that. So the first thing that happened, and we had nothing to do with this, the first thing that happened was this thing called PUA, where they made it possible for everybody to now get it because it was a really unique circumstance. Most people probably know that the length of time you could actually collect unemployment got extended 3 times. We were part of 2 of those. So that we feel great about. There have been programs tipped up that have helped sectors of our industry. Particularly, everybody talks about the SVOG, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. It started as a thing called Save Our Stages. Some colleagues of ours, various venue owners, performance venue owners in particular, got involved with that. That happened, and that's been after a really rough start. Took them over 4 months after it got voted in to actually start up and running and handing out grant money. But now that it's running as it's supposed to, and people are getting grant monies that happen to own performance venues or movie theaters. Some talent agencies are also getting it. Restaurant got to the caterers. So a couple of business areas in our world have been helped, but those weren't things we were fighting for. We were fighting for things that would help everybody.
Right. So just to kind of recap on how what the workflow is. So you decide on a piece of legislation that, and correct me if I'm wrong as I walk through this with you. Sure. So you decide on a legislation that is in reference to a group of people, or you decide to join legislation that is already in existence and curtail something about that to fit the industry, or do you do it from scratch?
Could be any of those. By scratch is by far the hardest. Most of 2020 we spent stumping for a bill called the Restart Act. It was written by Senators Young in Indiana and Bennett in Colorado. We got really good relationships with those offices because we took it upon ourselves to fight really hard for the thing that they autographed, put their autograph on first, and then they ended up getting a lot of support on both chambers for it. It did not happen. What we got at the end of last year was another round of PPP, as everybody now knows. By the time it was last October, we had jumped off of that because we saw the writing on the wall. It was not going to get picked up. Congress doesn't want to reinvent the wheel. They love taking something that's already up and doing it again. Maybe they edit it a little bit, amend it, as they say. So we got behind the PPP effort about 3 months before it passed and pushed really hard for it because we saw it as the only vehicle that was going to happen.
For those people who don't know what the PPP, can you just give us what that acronym is for?
Yeah, the Payroll Protection Plan, which the first iteration of that passed very quickly at the top of pandemic shutdowns back in late March of 2020, because everybody thought this would be a couple of a month problem. The idea was to don't lay off your staff. We'll give you money for them for the next couple months. And then if you use it mostly for payroll, we'll forgive it. It'll be a grant. First thing we did is we're like, what do you mean? What payroll? We're not allowed to work. What are we supposed to do? We're going to just send them paychecks. And a lot of people took it very literally and just kept their people. They have them come into the warehouse and sweep up, and they go, boss, the warehouse is clean. I don't care. Sweep it up again. I've got this PPP money. I have to use it on payroll, or I have to pay it back. That we worked on that getting amended very early on, and it did. They changed the percentage that you had to use for payroll versus other expenses, and then they did a second round of it that went online in January of this year.
So we had the PUA that was for the individual, and then you had PPP was for the business. So someone had employees or otherwise. Now, did LEC have anything to do with those actually becoming actualized, or were they already sort of in place that we just had to tap into?
Yeah, PUA and PPP were initialized without us. We didn't have a voice. We didn't have a lobby whatsoever. So if we had thought of it, it would have not gotten through because no one knew who we were. But we had everything to do, or a lot to do, with the continuation, because the unemployment thing expired at the end of, I think, August of 20. And we got that extended, let's see, 3 times. Or we were part of the voice that got that extended. The PPP, we absolutely jumped on that bandwagon once we saw that that was going to be the only way any more funding would be coming. Even as imperfect of a product as that was, we fought very hard for the second round that hit the streets on January of this year. And your original question is do we write our own piece of legislation or do we amend another? Where we are now, our one note legislative platform, if you will, is about getting business grants to happen that resemble something like what the performance venues and some of the caterers got. And when I say some of the caterers, they all basically would have qualified for it, but the program had only about a third as much money as it needed. So it ran out of money very quickly. The gentleman who wrote the restaurants bill happens to be my own representative here in Oregon. So I've been talking with him since he propped it up back last May when he introduced it in 2020. Yes, it was a whole year to get it up and running. We flagged it and we said, hey, if they just include the caterers in this would be a lot better. So I was able to reach out to them and get him to make sure caterers were part of the people who would be receiving these grants. And, fast forward too, it took it till March to pass and then May to actually hand out any money. So I was in a meeting with him and, he said to me, basically, he goes, you have to understand your lobby is very young and very new and we don't know who you are. You're getting better known and you're doing everything right. But look at the Restaurant Act. It took me a year to get that going. And I had the restaurant lobby behind me. 102-year-old organization was behind me, stumping for this, talking to everybody. And we had so much support for this thing. It still took over a year. This is going to take you a while. And so he's looking to put more money into that program today. And we're looking to have him double the amount he's asking for and have 2 pots of money, one for, as the bill was written, for the restaurants and caterers, the other for every other business that has lost a significant amount. So you don't qualify according to what industry you're in, you qualify according to how much you lost 2020 over 2019. So that's what we're trying to get done now. It is a heavy lift and has so close to 0% chance of happening anytime before December that I don't want anybody to get excited. But we have a tremendous amount of grassroots lobbying to do. We have a tremendous amount of meetings to take. We have a champion on Capitol Hill who wants to take up our measure and get it to happen. That's the first time we can say that. We've never had it. They're always very kind. They say, oh, this is a big problem. You guys really do need some help. But nobody picks up a pen and starts working on it. This is the first time they've actually been impressed enough.
I love how I'm starting to get, just for myself, I'm starting to get an understanding of why it's so important for the event professional to be involved at this level. But I think what a lot of the industry needs to understand is why this even matters for them. And so can you help me understand? And I saw this amazing documentary yesterday. I don't remember the name, but that's good because I don't want to have to quote them. But I saw, and it was about the plight of the restaurateur, the bartender, and the waitress as it pertains to the pandemic. And it was very clear why people in that industry, which in many times hospitality wants to be a catch-all. And it didn't seem as though the restaurateurs as well as the waitresses had to get the attention of what they were fighting for, in terms of, because everyone understands what restaurant is. Everyone kind of understands what waitress and bartending means. But I feel like when I hear you all talk, particularly on our calls, is that we were sort of this, I don't understand the events industry niche when it pertained to government and to legislation and to senators. So why is it that everyone and their mother knows what an event is and knows that you have to, put a lot of work in an event? And when you go to an event, there are clearly, people that went into making this happen. Why doesn't that speak for itself? Why did we have to sort of make ourselves known when everyone knows what an event is? And why wouldn't there be an industry?
Our job is to make it not known to you. Our job is to be invisible. We wear black to work, for crying out loud. We don't want our attendees and our guests and our ticket holders to notice us. We want to put on a show. We want to teach them how to sell their products better. We want to help them celebrate. We want to help them raise funds, or to act more to the point, if it's an attendee, we want for them to be very generous when they bid on these auction items, right? So everything we do is around creating a space where they're free to just be entertained or be educated or celebrate, right? It's our job to be invisible. And for those of us who jumped into advocacy right now, I think we all had that shower moment on a Wednesday morning, somewhere around the 17th of March of 2020, where we went, oh crap, no one knows we're here. They will, as soon as restaurants open back up, everybody's going to think the world's fine again, but we will not be fine. Even if there's not gathering moratorium still, our clients aren't going to gather for a while. And no one will know trade shows are gone. No one will know conferences are gone. Sales launches are gone. No one will know it's all of the fundraisers are in the virtual space now. About the only thing that's going to happen maybe is weddings will go again. And it turns out we were right. That's about what happened this summer. And some festivals. That surprised even me. I was very surprised that a lot of concerts and festivals went this summer. And I don't think it went very well from a health perspective, but that's above my pay grade. If I had a pay grade. Sorry, was that my outside voice? So
come on, inner monologue. Look, this is real. We real here on the State of Events. That's real. That's real. Yeah.
That's why they didn't know. That's been our problem. What you just described, Sonia, was exactly what our last year and a half has been. Finally, we are cracking through that. I mean, the last 3 to 4 months, our conversations with, especially, committee leadership, especially in the House, has been more about, oh yeah, we know who you are. Oh, and we'll stop and we'll go, just be sure, if you're going to be one of those people that says, oh, you're the venue industry, right? We're going to stop you and correct you. Because that's what we did a lot for at least the first year
correction,
plus. The
redirect.
best we could get is, oh,
we are not hospitality. We're not.
I mean, I don't even know if we're in hospitality, and it honestly doesn't matter. We knew months ago that we needed to take industry definition out of it, because there's not enough. We can't collect enough NAICS code. The NAICS code is what they give you for your taxes. It says what industry you're in. And believe you me, our little ecosystem of people who work to put together an event, and as well as I do, there could be 30 or 35 companies working on a fundraiser, for instance. I'll bet you there's 30 or 35 different NAICS codes. There's no way you can collect everybody and not have somebody fall through the cracks. So we've been fighting for, you qualify for this program because you lost X amount year over year. That way, no one falls through the cracks. You heard of a travel advisor? They're in the same boat we are. They're our partners now in a much bigger coalition.
Oh, wow. I didn't even make that connection till right now.
They don't get their commissions until after people travel.
Yeah.
And so now travel's getting canceled again. They lost most of their travel for last year. And most of what they do is business travel. What is business travel? They're going to an event. So we're all kind of in this together, even though they're really not part of our trade, are we? So it's immoral to fight for one description of who should be helped, who's down on their back, being trampled by the last year and a half, versus who doesn't quite qualify because really no one knows who you are. Right. That should not be the way, and that's not how we're fighting it. So
that's incredible. And that actually leads me to my next question, because I do want to get into a little bit of describing LEC, its conception, and all of these things, because I think it's really important if we're going to set this framework of what is legislation and then what is specific legislation, then we have to know how to jump on advocacy work. And so do you feel that Live Events Coalition's conception, or since that conception, do you feel that people are becoming more passionate about all the different efforts, whether it be advocacy work, whether it be legislation, whether it be what we just discussed, and making yourself known? Do you think that you've had at least the awareness factor hit where you were hoping to hit and land, rather?
We did for a time. Bit by bit, states opened up starting in the spring, and folks went back to work. And so I think that some of the two things, some of the, as you say, passion for the advocacy waned because everybody's like, well, going back to normal. I didn't get any before. My efforts I signed 3 letters and took 2 surveys. It didn't get me anywhere. So I'm just going to go back to work. So there was that energy, but there's also a fatigue. Advocacy and that fight takes a lot of energy. Even if you're just clicking a button and signing a petition, that takes a lot of energy and paying attention to what's going on in this political year has been such a up and down roller coaster, wild, crazy scene like nothing Capitol Hill's ever seen before. Everybody's just tired of it. So between those 2 things, I would say that there is definitely a cycle, at least. With the Delta variant, is everybody seeing cancellations again? Looks like all the corporate events are going to push to 22 at this point, with just a few hanging on from what we can tell. And we've got a survey running currently right now to find out if we're right about that. We're trying to ask as many people as will take this survey to tell us, what are you seeing in your book of business? Are you losing stuff? Are you losing stuff in one area or just all areas? And why are they canceling? That kind of thing. And we want to know, but what we predict from an advocacy standpoint is that this may fuel another wave of the desire to get busy and write your senator or whatever, sign a petition, pick up the phone, come to some of our town hall meetings, whatever it is, we'll find out. I think it's too soon to tell. And it could also be that because a lot of people still are going to get social events, they seem to be happening stronger than ever. And a lot of people, maybe they got all their festival work back. They'll just go, I don't think this Delta thing's going to be a problem. It was hard. It's just impossible to say. This is a fragile industry. I'm going to say it straight out. I don't mean that in a defamatory way, but it doesn't take much to knock us off. We don't need a single moratorium from a government for our industry to shut down, because our clients will do it for us. If they feel uncomfortable, or if they don't have the funding because of the economy's in the toilet. I'll put it to you this way. I told you the story about Representative Blumenauer talking about the restaurant bill he got tipped up, and how the restaurant lobby was 102 years old. And restaurants are also really well known. That doesn't hurt. But if we had formed the LEC, let's say after 9/11, I don't know about you, but we lost every piece of business after 9/11. For like, there were no Christmas parties, there was no Halloween, anything. Corporates canceled stuff. And for about 4 months, it was kind of a bloodbath in terms of just getting any events work. Or during the economic downturn in 08/09, that was also a really rough time for this industry. Again,
Really rough.
Stuff
rough.
just didn't happen. The economy was in the toilet, right? If we had tilted up LEC then and had begun having conversations with our elected officials and established ourselves as a real industry and educated the world as to what this industry really is, this would have been a lot easier the last year and a half for us to get things done, get attention. But we really spent the first at least year of it just telling the story of who we were. We were trying to honestly build the plane and fly it at the same time. And
Right.
If anybody wants to know, does LEC matter? Because I don't know if you've really done anything. Well, first of all, we have. We've been instrumental in, as I mentioned before, we've gotten a few things to happen. There's no way for us to go and crow about that, nor would we. Second of all, it's because we needed time to build an organization. Now we have a board of directors. We have committees that are working on education, working on safety, and working on development, and bringing on states as chapters. My own state is an official state chapter now. Our probably number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 expense is this firm that we hire to be our lobbyists. It's bloody expensive. And
Yeah, it is.
Raising the money for that is critical. While they're not going to do the work for us, we do most of the heavy lifting ourselves on committee, but they advise us in ways we can't have known. In other words, we've learned enough to get ourselves into trouble, but not enough to get ourselves out of trouble. So we need those guys to advise us, to tell us, okay, now is the time we're going to unleash a grassroots effort, or now's the time for you to go get new business data, or now's the time to, let's focus on getting that national media coverage right now. And they'll advise us on that. And then if we don't know what's happening from a meeting they just had, because everybody's speaking in code, they'll unpack it for us and they'll go, well, here's what that legislative assistant from blah blah's office really meant when she said this. And we'll go, okay, okay. So they're still educating us in a way that we can't live without.
Right, right. That
So
constant, yeah, that constant pouring into you from an educational standpoint is important, especially because
right.
again, if you know, we've been so used to just being behind the scenes. Now we have to come to the front. We have to be the main event. We have to be the main actor now. And I don't think
Yep.
many of us don't know how to do that. We're just so used, like you said, we're just so used to being not seen in the back. We want that in most of our cases. We like kind of don't want the limelight.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at this point, now more than ever, we need to be the loudest voice in the room in this case. And that actually leads me to my next question, because you and I spoke a little bit about, you know, when we see other advocacy work, you know, pick your poison, if you will take any topic of discussion to advocate for. There are the frontliners, right? So there's the protesting. There's what I saw much of in the documentary with the restaurant industry. They took it to the streets. That
Yeah.
was the loudest thing, and that made sense, right, for that
Yeah.
industry. For our industry, though, we tend to have the people who don't want to get out there and hold up a picket sign. So can you describe a little bit of what does advocacy look like in a different way that may not be protesting, that may not be you know, showing up on the footsteps of, you know, your local Capitol office? What does other ways of advocacy pan out in this way?
One of the many reasons why we now are starting to have a voice that's recognized as an advocacy group, as an industry, and as a lobby, at the tender young age of 1.5. One of those reasons is through the grassroots things that happen. And I'll give you an example. It was a lousy summer last year to go out and picket because things were already happening on the subject of equity. So we did everything we could to not do that and not steal that fire and not, or that thunder, and not take away the spotlight from that important issue. We did not want to be Me Too in the way, sorry, not Me Too like the Me Too movement, but look at me. We didn't want to be those people, right? We wanted to advocate in a different way and get the attention in a different way. So one of the things that happened in a lot of cities was we did what's called empty events, where folks would set up an entire event safely on a big plaza somewhere on a rooftop. We did one on the mall in Washington, D.C. There's one in downtown LA. There's one in Dallas, one in Orlando, where you just set up an entire event, stage, video, sound system, and nothing on it. And each table represented X millions of workers or a different part of our industry, like lighting, AV, and staging, like planning and producing it. So, and it would have these little bullet point little reader boards on each table. I'm forgetting the word, but a little laminated infographic sitting on each table. So that happened in a lot of places and got a ton of press coverage. I believe they did it in Minneapolis too, and I want to say Chicago as well. Then we had case pushes. Those were more along the lines of folks who work in the entertainment side of the events business, but folks would basically just get a black road case and push it down from point A to point B. And for instance, in Salt Lake City, they just went down the road that leads to the state capitol and just quietly gathered, and then the press came and interviewed them. It was all nonviolent, and yeah, sometimes there were picket signs. New York City did one. We had the red alert for restart, where we lit up buildings in red all over the country on all the same night back in September of 20. So we did a lot of things like this that generated a lot of media coverage. And now we're at the point where we still get a lot of, believe it or not, we're still getting a lot of local media coverage. We're just now cracking having some national coverage. And this is all key. People participated in this. They gave up their time and they went and did it. And no, you shouldn't just organize one and not have a plan. It's really good if we're all singing from the same hymnal, but you should join us as a member and know what the effort looks like so we can all have this effort together. The little bitty picking away at the problem is just needle in a haystack kind of approach. It's good to have one central clearinghouse for, listen, what's the thing going to be? Is it going to be a hashtag barrage in social media? And we've done that too. We took over an entire hashtag for like 3 weeks last year. And again, it all changed the playing field to make sure we're known. Now that we're known, we have a champion. We were never going to get this champion as nobodies. So we had to become somebodies first. And all these sorts of things made that happen. I think the big thing is being educated, and a great way to do that is to come to our monthlies. We give you a lot of really good information. We try to keep you up to speed on what we're doing. And again, I mentioned before, this idea of singing from the same hymnal is so important that LEC is now joined up with 16 other industry organizations that are our sister industries, such as outdoor amusement, such as the travel agent people, such as the rental ARA, which is really part of our umbrella, the American Rental Association, and professional photographers and custom tailors. All these people just got plummeted by this, right? So it's important enough to us that we've now joined with them. And that's how important the singing from the same hymnal really is. I was speaking to a senator once who said, I want you to talk to these people in the consumer show world. They're part of your world, right? I'm like, well, yeah. Well, they have their own coalition, and they're sending me a different piece of recommended legislation, and you guys need to get on the same page. And so that was straight from the horse's mouth. So I think the important thing is that you don't need to go this alone, and it's probably exhausting and a little frightening to think of going alone from a grassroots basis. So do come into this group, be part of this group, join. It's $75. The money goes straight for this advocacy. Nobody gets paid. Not a single dime has gone into anybody's pockets, other than the people who we pay for our email service and our website, and of course our lobbyists. So that's the first thing, is don't do it in a vacuum. Be part of this bigger voice, be part of this bigger group. The second thing I'd say is get educated. I didn't know anything about this, none of this. Now I can talk about budget reconciliation all day long if you'd like me to. I just now barely kind of know what I'm talking about, kind of barely, maybe enough to sound important. But trust me, there's a lot to know. Like, imagine if we'd all had business interruption insurance that included pandemics before this happened. None of this advocacy would be happening right now.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's just
that.
huge. That's just huge right there in understanding and that's, again, listeners, friends, audience, this is the point of being connected to these kinds of communities, because I don't even think that people sometimes are seeing beyond paycheck and seeing beyond, my personal economics were affected. No. We need to take it a step further and think how this is affecting business insurance, which I had out the gate because I had to. I happened to just, like, when I launched my company, I had a contract that was asking me if I had certain things, and I was like, no, let me go get it. I didn't learn the hard way.
Yeah.
But but many of us did in the pandemic. We learned the hard way. Oh, yeah. So now, exactly, protection in these ways. Now we might be able to have insurance dialogue that we've never been able to have before.
Well, there's a path to it. It's being workshopped right now. I know whose office is being workshopped in, and I can't talk about it, but it's being workshopped. And actually, I went to my first subcommittee hearing on this topic nearly a year ago. It was in discussion. So I can tell you one side wants to throw it out and the other side wants it there. I can tell you that it would likely be a private and governmental partnership. There's no way the insurance industry could offer this product and not go bankrupt in 2 months if it ever happened, was needed. So there's a reason why it's there. There's a lot of folks who are going to believe it's not possible. It will be an exceptionally heavy lift to make happen along the orders of healthcare reform. I don't want to kid anybody about this, but it is being workshopped, and we are in on those conversations, and they do know that we're here, and they know that if this had existed, we wouldn't have been bugging them so much for the last year. They're sick of hearing from us now. They want us to go away because we don't have any problems. Wouldn't that be a great reason? That'd be a great reason to go away, wouldn't it?
Yep.
The worst thing we could do is let all of this fall apart and have to start over at the next catastrophe. I started to say it's a fragile industry. It doesn't take much to knock us off our stuff, and there will be other tragedies. There will be a hurricane that comes through and an entire schedule of people's social events and people's festivals. Everything gets canceled. Wouldn't it be great if we had the kind of voice that could get funding set up for this sort of thing in advance? Wouldn't it be great if we had this business interruption insurance, or some form of that? Wouldn't it be great if we had a system set up where we don't make the government go through all of this panting and moaning and yelling and screaming and stabbing each other because there's this new problem. We have actually planned for it in advance. We have such a voice that we say, we know there's going to be a problem. So let's get the rules in place for what happens if we meet these certain thresholds and our industry just tanked again. Now, do we want to express ourselves as such a fragile industry that we're going to be a constant problem? No, it's a balancing act. We don't want to represent ourselves that way at all whatsoever. And when I say we're a fragile industry, please know that I'm using a little bit of conjecture, at least, to
well, because events are fragile.
absolutely. It doesn't take a lot to cancel one. So I think being proactive is why you don't let what we've done in the last year and a half to prop this lobby up. Don't let it go to waste. Don't start over again. That's the worst thing we could do. So the trick now, whether or not we're successful, and I want everybody to understand, we're closer than ever, but there's still a long way to go on this one. It's a heavy, heavy lift. Whether or not, we have to keep this lobby in place. It's important. And we can't lose interest just because we've gone back to work. We can't lose interest just because, well, no letter I ever send ever helps. Or those guys, those politicians are just crooks. Look, none of that's true. You may have an opinion about this politician or that politician and said a bad thing or said something you didn't agree with. Listen, you got to forget all about that. The system we have is the system we have. You want to change it? Get on in and change it. That's what we're trying to do right now.
There's the active and then there's the reactive, and we want to be we want to respond. We don't need to react. Reacting has really not gotten us anywhere, at least in this past almost 2 years.
If we don't know that by now, we're not paying attention. So I would advise you know who your representatives are, and if there's somebody who sits on the Department of the Interior or the Interior Committee, they're probably not going to help us much. If they're sitting on small business though, or budget, or ways and means, those are all things that have to do with helping small businesses, at least small businesses, and the other two are about money. So now maybe there's somebody that you might want to talk to, and you can certainly do that. I would ask respectfully, please know what the ask currently is, because again, we're back to that. Let's all sing from the same hymnal thing. But I would just ask, if you're going to pick up the phone, keep it general and just educational. So you're making sure they know about Live Events Coalition and about how hard our businesses got hit. And we had about 2 months back and now we're losing it again. Just make sure to either keep it super general around those things or really know what our ask is. And you can do that by going to our website.
And to add my little what you can do also, that would be super helpful. Use this time to legitimize yourself. Not that needs to be there so that you can be validated and not, you matter even if you don't. But we're going to be running some, if you're following the State of Events, if you're part of our newsletter, and if you're definitely following us on all of our social media, you're going to see this big push. And we're going to start talking about how to legitimize yourself. What is an LLC? What is an entity? Why are those things important? Because there are certain things that you cannot tap into if you are not an entity. And it takes a week of your time. I became a business in 1 week in 2016. You can get a name, you can get a fake name that you're maybe going to change later. It doesn't matter. Don't let those things that you have to do in order to legitimize yourself stop you. But it is important to use this time to legitimize yourself. Get whatever permits you need. If you're a vendor, if you're selling a product, just get legitimized. Use this time to do that, because there is a little bit of weightiness that you can bring to these calls, to these emails, to these voice messages when you actually are, when someone can look up your EIN. I'm just saying.
That's for sure. And when you actually now have an NAICS code, that is super critical. And part of the challenge, as I said, is that we're such a fractured bunch. We come from so many different NAICS codes, and then beyond that, there's so many people who are independent contractors. That fight to make the entities include independent contractors and gig workers has been hard. It's hard. We've been a little bit successful with it, at least to hear them repeat it back to us. But honestly, if you're all just LLCs, it goes a lot better.
goes a long way.
That you're going to be left out of a lot less.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Wow, Dwayne, our time is coming to an end, but this has been, all we wanted to do was just plant the seed, set the ABCs of this. When there's a lot more that we can go into, and we will over the month as we start to climb the literacy ladder and really understand what this is. But thank you for your time. How can people get in touch with you, or how can people join LEC, do all the social plugs and all that?
Yeah, it's GovAff, GOVAFF at liveeventscoalition.org.
liveeventscoalition.org. And is it open membership season, or do I have to wait until there's a
You can join anytime. Join anytime. You can join as a company. There's different levels you can join at. If you feel like, oh man, I had the greatest summer, I want to make sure to become a bronze or a silver sponsor. I'm going to give a little more than by the book I would really need to. This is an important thing for our industry. We will very much thank you for that.
Yes,
but
yes.
you can join as small as an individual at $75 for a year.
Thank you, Dwayne, for your time. Thank you for the work that you all are doing. I for sure will see you all soon. And keep up the good fight. You're doing great.
It's an honor. Thanks so much for having me.
You've been listening to The State of Events, where event professionals connect. For more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. To engage with us on social media, look for @TSO Community. That's @TSOE Community. You can also visit our Facebook page, The State of Events. Make sure you stay connected by joining our newsletter. And lastly, we would love to hear from you. If you have topic suggestions, if you want to be a guest on the show, send us an email to inquiries@thestateofevents.com. That's inquiries@thestateofevents.com.